Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
I did the story the other day about the new lemon law in Quebec, and the story said that it was a great new thing because they had changed the law radically to make it easier for consumers in Quebec to have their lemons taken care of by the manufacturers. And I went through that at length, and one of the questions I had was, well, it doesn't appear to address attorney fees, but because Canada, of course, follows the English rule in a lot of ways with respect to the laws and who pays attorney fees, I think that they'd be all set that way. But I said, that was speculation on my part. I said, if anybody out there knows the answer to that question, contact me. So I've had a flurry of activity on this with several people via email who are experts in the field, and we've figured this out, and the answer is not good. It turns out the lemon law that just got passed in Canada is not that good. And in fact, I would argue and say that it is not as good as any lemon law in America because of the fact it does not include attorney fees. And I've gotten that now from several people who've said that that is in fact the case, that they tried to get attorney fees covered in the statute, but they couldn't. Therefore, the law got passed without them, which makes this pretty much toothless, meaning that if you've got a defective car in Quebec and you want to pursue the lemon law, you've got to hire an attorney with your own money and pursue it that way. And that might not work out for you because the manufacturer knows that you're paying for your own attorney. So I got this email in response to the video. Good morning, Mr. Steve. I'm the journalist who wrote that article on the lemon law story, driving.ca. Thank you so much for making it the subject of your recent and very interesting YouTube video. I'm so happy for two things. Someone in the USA did pick up the story, and someone was able to make it great fun to listen and watch to. And that was from Nadine, who wrote the article. And so I responded to her and said, thank you very much for letting me know this, but do you know, does the law address attorney fees and the recovery? Because I've had attorneys from Canada tell me they couldn't find it and didn't know if I was right on my guess about the English rule. And what I was referring to is I got another email from a guy who said, hi, Steve, and his name is Steve, by the way. I'm a lawyer in Quebec and have been for over 20 years. I just finished listening to your video on the new Quebec lemon law. It's the first I heard of the American versus English rule. I'm not sure how the other provinces work, but I'm pretty sure it's not as clear-cut as it is in your video. However, in Quebec, getting attorney fees reimbursed from the losing party is exceptional and only ordered in cases of abuse of procedure such as under Article 51 of the Quebec Code of Civil Procedure. This situation is a huge hindrance to anyone wanting to exercise their rights, but we seem to have adapted to it. From what I understand of Ontario law, and I may be wrong, the situation is a little different. So he's saying it can vary from province to province. If you make a legitimate offer to settle and ultimately win your case at the approximate amount of the settlement offer, then you can be awarded attorney fees from the time of your offer. And that's similar to what can happen in America with a thing called the offer of judgment rule. He wrote, in any event, Quebec has nothing similar. But whenever a client wants to include their legal fees in their claim, I usually just shake my head. So I wrote back to him and said, do you know if the law contains a fee shifting provision? If not, then the law could be close to worthless. And he wrote back and said, good question. I checked out the proposed bill and did not see anything like that. The minister's comments on the article don't address the question of fee shifting. One possibility is the application can be made before the small claims court, whose limit is $15,000, but that doesn't feel right. And of course, most cars nowadays cost a little bit more than $15,000. He says the article on the Consumer Protection Act states, on an application by a consumer who is the owner or long-term lessee of an automobile is declared a seriously defective automobile by the court where, and then he says, so now I'm curious, I'll be calling the Consumer Protection Office tomorrow to inquire. So he's going to follow up on this for me. Lastly, most of these cases will be before the Court of Quebec, whose competency goes up to $75,000. They've recently streamlined the process for cases before that court, so the cost wouldn't be excessively high. I'll let you know what the results of my inquiries are. Steve. He then wrote me back and said, Steve, I spoke to someone at the Consumer Protection Office and I'm dismayed and disillusioned. The competency of the Court of Quebec is for claims of up to $85,000, so presumably most of these types of claims would proceed there. New rules were adopted in early summer to streamline cases there. I can't say if they'll be successful, but before the rule change, most cases took at least a year, if not 18 months. From my point of view, the lemon law legislation simply eases the burden of proof on the consumer. The consumer no longer automatically requires an expert to prove the vehicle is a dud, as long as the same problem was addressed 3 times. The law makes no direct mention of fee shifting. I can envision the reimbursement of lawyer fees being granted to the plaintiff when the manufacturer can't make a reasonable argument in its defense, but this is not an automatic thing. I can also envision claims for inconveniences if the consumer is stuck with a lemon for an extended period of time, but this ignores the reality of living with a bad vehicle for any length of time. So he's saying that he couldn't find it, and it looks like it does not include it, and therefore it is what I was worried it would be, and that is kind of like an empty promise. So Nadine, who wrote the article, told me she's going to send over a note to somebody else who is involved in this, and I got a note back from a gentleman at the Automobile Protection Association, which was heavily involved in, I believe, the passage of this law. He said, "Hi, Steve, I'm a fan of your show. The Automobile Protection Association did indeed ask that the draft legislation include a provision for the recovery of attorney fees, but it was not acted upon. Quebec's legislation on defective vehicles is an amendment to one section of the province's Consumer Protection Act, not standalone legislation. The manufacturer and dealer are jointly liable. There is no arbitration system, so the buyer of a defective vehicle will have to go to civil court to cancel a sale with the related cost and delays. However, they will no longer require expert evidence if the vehicle meets the criteria for repair attempts or days off the road that should make winning a case easier. Quebec's Consumer Protection Act already had powerful remedies that permit a buyer to request the return of defective goods, but the car makers don't recognize them. It almost always requires suing the automaker and dealer to cancel a sale of a serious defective vehicle. Few consumers go that far because of the cost and delays. This new lemon law definition is likely not going to make a large change in the relationship between the automaker, the dealer, or the customer in Quebec initially because car manufacturers are unlikely to comply with it voluntarily. Other sections of the amendment you covered are likely to be transformative when lawyers actually learn how to apply them. He's referring to right to repair, access to diagnostic tools, reasonably priced replacement parts, and a general prohibition on programmed obsolescence, which apply to autos and consumer goods, including large appliances and cell phones. We'll have to wait for the regulations to see how they're applied. And he signs that regards. So it turns out that my fear is correct. The lemon law that Quebec just passed changes what you need to do to prove your vehicle's lemon, but it does not provide for attorney fees being paid by the manufacturer if you win, which is how it is in America. In all 50 states, we've got lemon laws, and they all shift fees. If it didn't have that portion of the statute, no one would pursue it, almost no one. And so many people who call my office sheepishly say, I've got a lemon law claim, but I don't know how to pay for an attorney. I say, you don't have to if you got a good case. Really? Yeah, the manufacturer will pay on your behalf. And so I've been doing this for 32 years, and I'm going to let you know right now, the majority of my income as an attorney has been paid to me by auto manufacturers. So if you look at it in a very, very roundabout but hypothetical way, I'm employed by the car makers. They're the ones who pay the bulk of my income as an attorney. And at the end of every year, I get tax forms from them saying, here's how much money we've paid you. Okay? And so without that, very few of my clients could have afforded to pay me. And the manufacturers know that. That's why they fought putting it in the bill. And so, unfortunately, there was a lot of attention paid when the bill got passed because it does contain some really good stuff. The right to repair stuff is huge. But the lemon law stuff is pretty much meaningless. It's a mirage. It's an empty promise. Because being told, yes, here's how you can have your car declared a lemon if you litigate, without providing a way for you to litigate, means that most people can't do it. And the manufacturers know that. And so if you contact a manufacturer in America and say, I've got a defective car, I'm going to sue you. Car manufacturer looks at the case and goes, okay, if it's a good case, they might sue us because there's so many attorneys out there who'll take these cases. In Quebec, they're going to go, oh, they're going to sue us? Fine, we'll see you in court to see if you actually do hire an attorney and how much you're willing to pay an attorney before you win your case. So it's an unfortunate situation. It's a huge oversight. It's a gigantic oversight. And it wasn't an oversight in the sense that I assure you that everyone knew what was going on. But there was such opposition to putting that in there because the manufacturers knew that if they could keep that out, didn't matter what else went into the bill as far as the lemon law went. So unfortunately, the lemon law in Quebec is not as good as we thought it was. And it's primarily because it's missing the one important component, and that is the fee-shifting statute that the lemon laws in America have. So I appreciate that Nadine wrote the article and wrote me a very nice email. But unfortunately, she had said in her article that the lemon law in Quebec is now probably better than that of most states in America. If you listed it along with the 50 lemon laws in America, it would come in at 51st. Meaning, I'm talking about the lemon laws of, let's say the lemon laws of North America, okay? So you rank all 50 states and put Quebec's in there. Quebec's goes right at the bottom. So that's where it is. It's unfortunate. And I'm hoping that with more agitation, more public outrage on this, that maybe someone's going to come along and say, you know, guys, you missed one thing. That one thing you got to put in there. So that's the situation with the lemon laws of Quebec. Questions or comments, put them below. Otherwise, talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law. Turn your wounds into wisdom.